What did your crush do that absolutely killed your interest? Story 1. Sorry for my bad English, but here's my story. I had a crush on someone, let's call her Amanda. For 3 years, I tried to get with her. Amanda used me if she needed attention, and I was cool with that. One night, Amanda was ringing my doorbell at 2 a.m. It was obvious that Amanda was drunk, and I let her in so we could talk. After a few minutes, she said she wants me to bang her. I told her that I never sleep with someone who's drunk, but we could do it when she's sober. She got angry, and the insults came flying. She stormed out of my house, got in her car, backed it up into my motorcycle, and drove away. I never talked to her again after that night. She needed attention, all the red flags you needed to end the crush. Story 2. Huge crush on a fellow uni student. I was invited over for what I expected to be a platonic study date, but hey, any time spent is better than just being alone, or so I thought. Got there and found another student from class also. Okay, study group. Turns out her mom and her set us up for a full-press multi-level marketing pitch. Video, literature, the works. I stayed a bit, not to be rude, excused myself shortly, and only talked to her in class just in passing from then on. Huge letdown. Edit. MLM means multi-level marketing, aka a pyramid scheme. Signing up to both buy and sell something, while recruiting others to sell also. You get a % of all your recruits' sales also. All the percentages basically flow upward, so the only way to make any significant money is to be high in the tree, towards the top of the pyramid. It's all BS, basically. That is probably the most insane thing I could imagine. You know darn well she's not keeping friends after that. Story 3. Attempted to get through a horror movie together, and he kept letting the movie run, then rewinding the movie so that the horror never came. He pretended to be scared and would whine about the scare that was coming. I guess he thought this was a cute gesture and would refuse to continue. It dragged a 5-minute scene into a 45-minute production of his, "Oh no, but I'm scared. No, I don't want to. This is terrifying." This was a guy who told me that he loved horror movies. He was full of really weird contradictions, but this was the straw that broke the camel's back. What the heck did I just read? So just before a scare, he'd keep rewinding over and over, saying he's too scared of what's coming up? Forget that guy. I hate people talking, never mind rewinding constantly. Then, on 6th rewind, the movie changed and the character knew exactly where the jump scare was. This is just the most bizarre thing. I can't even really figure out what the point of it is. I can get wanting to rewind if you didn't quite hear a line, or if you thought you noticed a detail you want to take another look at. Even then, if you're watching the movie with another person, it's good etiquette to ask them before rewinding. But if you have to rewind several times to psych yourself up for the next scare, maybe you'd be happier just watching a different movie. Imagine if a guy watched a rom-com with a girl, and she kept rewinding every time it looked like the couple might break up, because she just wanted to watch the part of the movie where they were still in the early phases of dating. This is just as weird. I'm betting this is the kind of guy who films himself playing cheap, low-res horror games and screaming at things that aren't remotely scary. It's the dumbest attention-seeking nonsense out there. Although I've heard those YouTubers do pretty well on OnlyFans for some reason. Story 4. In college, I was crazy about a girl named Megan. She was maybe 2 years younger than me, blonde, life-of-the-party type gal. Took her to dinner and chatted her up about her life. Got to talking about past SOs and realized she had very little experience with meaningful, loving relationships. Romantically, it seemed she was on autopilot. In fact, the more we talked, the more obvious it became that she wasn't ready to love anyone but herself. Which, good for her. Self-love and self-discovery are kind of big parts of going away to college and growing up, but I realized in that moment that what I wanted versus what she wanted were miles apart. It was a crystallizing moment, and I felt the distance between us widen and watched her shrink away. Never asked her out again, and she never asked why. Either she felt it too, or the autopilot just kicked in, or she wasn't interested. Story 5. He picked me up for our first date, and his car was disgusting. Not talking about a few trash items, the entire back seat and floorboard was completely covered in piled up trash, even up front. I had to step on empty McDonald's bags, old soda bottles, wrappers, etc. to even get in, and all he said was, "Just move it around with your feet." No sorry or anything. Made me feel like trash too. Like, dang, couldn't even clean up a little? This is wild. Like, I clean everything a date might see if we're going out. My car, my apartment, if we might come back. Literally anything I need to. How people do this is beyond me. Edit. Some of y'all seem to think cleaning means that I live in filth or lying about my cleanliness habits. Stuff falls behind, guys and gals. Relax. Story 6. Dude was the perfect epitome of the term D-bag. He used to be nice to people only to gain their trust and then betray them. He was attractive, though, and a smooth talker as well. We started talking, became friends, and I developed a crush on him. Unfortunately, I never knew then the type of double-headed snake he was. Then one day I witnessed him throwing his best friend under the bus just to save his reputation. Completely lost interest. Cut ties with him, and he gave no fricks about it. Only then did I realize how toxic people can sometimes be. English isn't my first language, so when I read one day I witnessed him throwing his best friend under a bus, my brain didn't immediately register that it was a saying. I thought he actually threw his friend under a bus. English has some weird sayings. Doesn't every language? If you aren't sure what to think about someone, paying attention to how they treat or even just talk about friends and family is a pretty huge indicator. That said, you can't always go off one thing they do wrong. Throwing a friend under the bus is obviously wrong, but it's also the kind of thing a person might do out of fear before ultimately learning their lesson. If you're a living, breathing human being, then you will at some point betray a person who trusts you, whether you mean to or not. You might say that you never have or never will, but I promise that the friend whose trust you break will disagree. That doesn't mean you're intentionally gaining people's trust just so you can mess with them later. This guy might have legitimately been a jerk, and it's ultimately your choice if one red flag is enough to turn you away. But generally speaking, it's good not to make assumptions too quickly. That's a recipe for winding up in isolation rather quickly. Story 7. Treated me like doo-doo for being the only female in our paintball team. He said that women belong in the kitchen, not the battlefield. Edit. I never thought the worst memory of my life would bring me the most karma out of everything I've ever posted. Thanks. I kinda hope he has read it and finds it now. Edit 2. Guys, I made a mistake. He didn't say battlefields. We are Polish. He said something that cannot be translated perfectly, so I just captured the idea. The word battlefield is mine. I didn't know how to call it in English. Now I know it's a field. Sorry. Story 8. She offered to drive and picked me up in her car because we had plans to go out to dinner and get to know each other better. I realized after about 20 minutes she was not driving to the restaurant and instead stopped at a gas station to get into someone else's car and buy drugs. Basically made me accessory to a drug deal under false pretenses. Believe it or not, this has sort of happened to me. The guy was driving us in my car and conducted a deal in a back street of an industrial estate close to where I lived. I was baffled. I had big self-esteem issues, and we had been fooling around, and I just didn't even care about anything he did up till that point. I was so angry he had literally used my car to commit a crime. Story 9. We worked together, and as I got to know him more, I learned he talked badly about everyone. Nurses that are amazing, he'd belittle. Talk about how certain people don't know what they're doing because they asked for an ultrasound IV as they were struggling getting a vein on a heroin addict. The paramedics were worthless. Doctors didn't know what they're doing, who he thought was hooking up, and it completely turned me off. He's in his early 40s and into gossip more than my teenage daughter. Gossipers are empty, hungry ghosts filling the void inside. Gossip is the devil's telephone. Best to just hang up. Moira Rose. Ah yes, the know-it-all ER tech who finished half of med school. This is the perfect example of what I'm talking about. People who spend all their time trash-talking others usually don't have much of anything positive worth saying about themselves. And even if it wasn't gossip, the fact that he spends all of his time complaining in general could be taken as a pretty huge red flag. Being alive inevitably gives you plenty of things to be angry and miserable about. You don't need to pile another person's anger and misery on top of it. Needing to vent once in a while is one thing, but when a person complains nonstop 24/7, don't expect either one of you to suddenly be happy if you get together. Story 10. I was 21 and in college. He was a classmate of mine. He seemed so charming and was easy on the eyes. One day I overheard him talking to his friends about how he doesn't date engineer women because math is for men. Edit. Some people are missing the point here. It's not that he said he wouldn't want to date an engineer that bothered me. It's that he said that women aren't meant for math. As an engineer who married another engineer, we can't make anything. And the first thing you built was a better life together. Story 11. She invited me over to her place, not as a date thing, but just to hang out as friends. Her house was absolutely filthy, and the glass of Coke she gave me had a hair in it. She was really cute, had a great personality, and was a genuinely nice person. But as soon as I saw cat poo on the floor near the front door, and just dirty everything, my crush disappeared, and I left in a hurry. Yeah, there's messy, and then there's this. I'm fine with mess and clutter. That stuff just needs tidying up. I cannot handle filth. Absolutely filthy. Ross Geller. Story 12. Filmed me and made Snapchat stories of it, all while I was in an argument with somebody from our neighborhood. Just no. I'm so kind to you. Why would you do that? Immediately blocked her on WhatsApp and unfollowed everywhere. Edit. Somebody commented they would not mind. She clearly did not ask me for permission. It was an argument where I was being yelled at for a parking mistake. If she enjoys somebody confronting me for an unintentional error, I don't think she's worth it. Thanks for the upvotes. I hate it so much that some of my friends post about everything on Snapchat when we hang out. I absolutely hate it. I don't know why so many people think filming each other without permission is okay. You'll occasionally see people defending themselves by pointing out that it's legal. Legality has nothing to do with good manners. There are a million words that are legal to say, yet those same people can't watch Tropic Thunder without having a heart attack. And for reasons I'll never understand, people who use Snapchat are honestly the worst about this. I have never seen people filmed without their knowledge or consent anywhere as frequently as Snapchat. Honestly, if your crush uses Snapchat at all, just go ahead and end it. You can do better. Story 13. Told me I wasn't attractive and that she could never possibly like me. Game over. Still better than keeping you around, though. There are 2 ways to do it. Number 1, you are effing ugly and nobody will ever love you. Number 2, hey, you're a nice guy, but I don't think we will work well. I think I'm looking for something else. All right. Nice guy is no longer a compliment. Some neckbeards will take great umbrage, and there are plenty of women who have now co-opted it as an insult for those neckbeards. Best to just avoid that phrase entirely. This commenter is wrong. The fact that some people use nice guy offensively doesn't mean this 2-word phrase can no longer be used. You can say literally anything sarcastically. It should be pretty easy to tell from context how someone is using this phrase. If you can't tell from context, you need to stop looking for partners and focus on finishing your GED. Story 14. His sister actually approached me and let me know that he was once arrested for locking their other pregnant sister in the basement, went on a coke binge while she desperately tried to get out, and went outside to beat their unsuspecting mother's van with a golf club. That was a big ol' nope. Sister's a legend, by the way. It was really cool of her to tell me about all that, and she actually continued to warn women about him even if some of the girls wouldn't listen and had to experience firsthand. She's really out here for her fellow females. Story 15. Girl in the car behind him honked when the light went green. He got out of the car and began screaming and banging on her windshields. That's when I knew he was a psycho and I needed to get out of that relationship. Took me a destroyed home and 2 restraining orders later, but we've been broken up for 3 years now. Story 16. Told me that smart girls are ugly and dumb girls are beautiful, so he'd rather date a dumb girl and wouldn't date me because I'm smart. That's dodging a bullet right there. And the worst part is, he admitted later he had a crush on me. I've never talked to him again. He was a tool. He played himself. Not only did he play himself, but he did it by making a pretty common mistake. Sometimes we come up with these little rules about the world and the people in it. His reality was that smart girls are usually ugly. Then whatever rules we set for ourselves, we refuse to let them be challenged. He saw this girl wasn't ugly and that he even had a crush on her. But because she was smart, he convinced himself that she wasn't his type. If you want to find someone, the best you can do for yourself sometimes is to challenge your beliefs. Not the ones that keep you safe or anything like that, but at least the ones that make broad assumptions about humongous groups of people. Story 17. Talked non-stop about himself and his accomplishments and never asked me one question about myself. Experienced this, but he would ask me questions about myself and, after one line from me, would take over the conversation and somehow direct the spotlight from my answer back onto himself, almost competitively. Went on a date with a guy similar to this. He loved himself, and whenever he asked me a question, he would take my reply and tell me why I was wrong for thinking it, and then tell me his right version. Story 18. Smoked. I know it's shallow and it makes me kind of a jerk. I'm aware, but I seriously can't stand the smell of cigarette smoke. Smoking is a very common deal breaker. Don't worry about it. What makes it worse is that I'm a filthy hypocrite too, because I don't mind people smoking weed around me. It's just cigarettes that set it off. Weed has a different smell to cigarettes. I would rather smell weed than tobacco. Story 19. We played Monopoly. That game brings out the absolute worst in people. Once, while playing Monopoly, we had lost some of the pieces, so we had to use Cluedo pieces instead. Long story short, I won, and my opponent got angry and stabbed me in the hand with the tiny dagger. That took a sharp turn. At least he got the point. Don't play Monopoly with anything sharp in proximity. Story 20. Kept arranging times to talk and whatnot, then always forgot or was not available. I've had the same thing happen to me. She would always text me and ask if I could chat at a certain time. Of course, I would agree. Then when I called, she would have her phone off or answer 5% of the time. I really liked her too, so I was just like, what the F? If you say you want to talk at so-and-so time, answering the phone might help. This is a pretty fair deal breaker. I once had plans to meet someone, and she left me waiting for over an hour without an excuse. When she got there, she said she had been on the phone. I asked if everything was okay, thinking it was an emergency, but nope, she literally just decided to sit around talking to a friend on the phone for an hour while I was waiting. People who don't keep their word after making arrangements with you are showing you that they don't value your time. You're there for whenever they actually feel like seeing or talking to you, and that's it. You aren't actually worth following through on the plans you set up, unless they happen to feel like it at the time. Story 21. This was years ago on a first date. He tried to convince me to quit my job and put all my savings into gold bars, then demanded I let him read my tarot cards to see if we'd be a good fit. Nope. Another controlling type, aye. It was such a bizarre combo of alt-right talking points and then a ton of woo. You usually don't find both kinds of ridiculous in the same person in the same hour. Please like and subscribe if you've made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of this video and have a wonderful day. Story 22. Being rude to the waiter and complaining that food is taking too long during dinner rush hour. I worked in the industry for a year. It's not easy when being slammed during rush. I will keep my mouth shut then. By that I mean even complaining to you, not the waiter. You can judge a person's character by how they treat those who can do nothing for them. Story 23. Didn't wash his hands after using the bathroom. Like Carlin said, if I gotta wash my hands after touching my own wang, I might as well just go ahead and wash my wang. Wouldn't that be fun? A bunch of guys crowded around the hand dryers trying to blow dry their wangs. I'm just playing. I wash them. Want to know how exactly this OP knew that he hadn't washed his hands. Were you in there together? Was this at someone's house and you noticed that you didn't hear the sink? Or did he just volunteer this information? Because if so, I'd really love to know what his justification was, or if he bothered getting one at all. But if OP specifically asked him if he washed his hands, then that comes off sounding a bit paranoid and controlling. This seems like such a simple matter for discussion, but there's actually a lot of potential nuance here that might completely change the story for me. Story 24. Talk trash about every woman in his life. Should have seen the red flags earlier. Didn't realize until later that he probably did the same to me. Apparently, having an opinion about anything and speaking for yourself isn't a very ladylike thing to do. He sounds totally not insecure. Story 25. Well, it turns out he wasn't interested in girls, so I knew I had to kill my feelings or feel stupid for keeping them. At least you got to know about it. It's way better than being in the dark. Like, in the closet. Story 26. Told me that she didn't like me back anymore. but maybe if I waited long enough, she would like me like that again. Did she expect human feelings to work like nostalgia? Imagine lying awake at night knowing you lost to a cat. Story 27. We were going on a date, and when we were just next to the cinema, she found her friend and she went with her instead. She probably told her friend to come to have an excuse to leave your date, mate. Exactly, that was her out. That doesn't sound like coincidence. I can't help but think exactly what the comments are thinking, that she didn't like the date and just bailed. I guess it's a good thing that it ruined the OP's crush. If he'd still had feelings for her after that, it would have made things pretty awkward. There's no telling why she bailed. Looks, personality, a lack of chemistry, it could have been anything. So I won't suggest that it was secretly OP's fault, but if I were in that position, I'd at least be looking at the possibility that it was. Story 28. Had a crush on this girl back in high school. She seemed like a sweet girl. After she rejected me, I let it go, but still was interested in maintaining some sort of friendship. Found out she was actually pretty toxic behind my back. She made fun of me for a lot of things that really didn't matter, like hand motions while talking, and I just lost interest in her entirely, even in a friendship. Story 29. I was chasing after some girl in college, and she really had my interest. I saw her in a cafe with a cigarette in her hand, and it immediately turned me off forever. Edit. Just thought about somebody smoking indoors. It was a different time. Story 30. Said she was starting up a group for LGBT youth. I asked her why, and then realized I had been barking up the wrong tree. I'm dumb. She's a lesbian. I thought I had found the one. We were good as married in my mind. Oh, buddy, even if she hadn't been a lesbian, never assume you found the one. That's always a good way to disappoint yourself. You never really know what the other person is looking for unless they tell you. And even then, what people want can change drastically over time. You have to take these things one day at a time and see how they unfold. If they don't pan out, that approach will keep it from being as devastating as it might have been otherwise. Story 31. Found out she was a religious homophobic bigot. The religious part I was already aware of, and wasn't a big deal, but didn't know she had strong negative views about homosexuality. I have 3 gay friends, so there was no way I wanted her in my life. Story 32. Told me he liked dating broken girls so he could fix them. See you later, boner. That's whack. I had an ex tell me that. She said that she liked dating guys with issues to try and fix them. Meanwhile, she had a ton of issues. Story 33. Jokingly punched another girl in the arm so hard that she was still rubbing it an hour later. Violence against women isn't funny, and after that I could only ever see him as a potential abuser. Story 34. Threw my $2,000 laptop through my new big screen TV. Story 35. In a group text with a ton of our mutual friends, he ignited an argument about lockdown and ended it with, "Sorry, I just like arguing," and that didn't pass the vibe check. I was going to comment on the story before this, but I don't think I need to point out that men who violently break expensive objects that don't belong to them are a bit of a red flag. But this one is more interesting to me. Not everyone will just tell you straight up that they enjoy arguing. However, it's good to look out for. It can be fun to have debates with your partner, depending on the tone they take and how good they are about choosing the right time and place for it to be acceptable, but you can usually tell when a person is arguing in good fun. If you can't tell, then it's possible the person just enjoys chaos in general, and they'll find more ways of creating it than through argument alone. That's someone you're definitely better off avoiding. Story 36. Told me he was only being nice to me because he was interested in a friend of mine. I see his Facebook post now. He is dumber than a box of rocks on a treadmill. Story 37. Asked if I wanted a drink of her Coke. I said yes and took one. Then she laughed and said, "Haha, you have my cold now." What the heck is wrong with people? Story 38. Haven't dated in 24 years, but mine treated a waiter like garbage. Nope. I also haven't been on a date in 21 years. I also happen to be 21 by pure coincidence. Story 39. Turned out to be the person eating everyone else's food from the break room fridge. That's punishable by death. My sandwich. Story 40. She asked me if I was good with kids because she was pregnant with her ex and that she's not good with kids. It was the first date. I actually have a bit of an issue with this one. Not wanting to be with someone who's pregnant is a perfectly fine choice to make for yourself. You might not want kids, or maybe you just don't want the drama of dealing with their ex. That's all fair. But this OP specifically draws attention to the fact that she brought this up on the first date, and I'm not sure I see the problem there. She's pregnant. That is absolutely information she should be volunteering on the first date. There's nothing gauche about telling someone at the outset that there are things going on in their life you may not wish to get involved in. Waiting to drop that information later would potentially accomplish nothing more than wasting both her time and yours. And if she meets someone who doesn't mind her situation, at least they won't feel manipulated by having it dropped on them after they'd already gotten attached. It's a little alarming that she seems to be looking for a stepdad to pull the weight in child rearing, but other than that, she did the right thing here. Story 41. Giving me mixed signals. Acting like he really likes me one day, acting like a usual friend the other day. What the hell, dude? Story 42. Ignored me when somebody new and shiny came along. It's better than keeping you as a doormat, mate. Good phrasing. Story 43. Lit the back fence of the school on fire to impress a mate. Arson does tend to be a deal breaker. Story 44. Told me, I have anxiety, that I should just stop worrying, and that it would make me more likable. This is a woefully common way of dealing with mental health issues. People who struggle with depression are frequently told to cheer up and get out of the house by people who don't realize that a trip to Six Flags when you're going through a depression spell would just be a wasted trip to Six Flags. Then there are the alcoholics who, with no treatment whatsoever, are told to just stop drinking. No matter what mental health issues you have, there's someone out there who thinks your real problem is being too stupid to come up with the world's most obvious solutions. Story 45. Chewed with her mouth open on our first date. I never thought that could kill my interest so rapidly. Story 46. She started to talk, and I realized she's dumb. Story 47. He told me he hadn't read a single book in his life. That's either really impressive or really sad. Story 48. Placed the tip on the table before we'd received service, before using it as a threat. Real ugly. Story 49. Dyed his hair one side with black and the other with blonde. He looked like a hedgehog. Story 50. She slept with my dad. Story 51. Yeah, I don't get washing. I just don't really like taking a shower or a bath or anything. Story 52. Puts raisins in a new-baked cinnamon bun. That was all the red flags I needed. Honestly, I think the OP is the red flag here. Raisins are dope. I can't actually say I've ever had raisins in a cinnamon bun before, but that hardly sounds like it would be terrible. And I think you can tell a lot about people by the food they eat. Someone who's a stickler for eating something the same way every time, without any variations whatsoever, probably isn't going to be very adventurous. People who don't appreciate flavor won't give you much flavor in a relationship. Mr. or Mrs. Raisin Buns has my interest. This OP just sounds like a fuddy-duddy. Story 53. I got to know them more, and I realized we don't have much in common. Story 54. Showed interest in me. I can't respect someone with that taste level. Story 55. Too critical about every word I utter under the name of sarcasm. This is a hard one to assess sometimes. I personally enjoy sarcastic women, but it can be hard to tell early on whether a sarcastic person is still able to respect boundaries, or respect others at all for that matter. Some people enjoy sarcasm, but know when to turn it off. Others make sarcasm their whole personality, and it gets tiresome pretty quickly. Story 56. Showed her lack of empathy for others during the pandemic. Story 57. Blamed everything that is wrong in this world on all men. Story 58. Kicked a dog. I also don't like this person, on your behalf. Story 59. Littered. That's so trashy. What a garbage person. Story 60. He was straight. That is kinda gay. Story 61. Bullied the quiet kid in class. Story 62. Said that she hated cats. Story 63. Used a racial slur. A lot of these last ones come down to basic differences in principle, but you'd be amazed at how many people will spot those early on and pursue the relationship anyway. I believe two people can probably make it work despite one or two differences in their core beliefs. However, it comes down to how fundamental that value is to your identity. And if you want to have kids someday, you have to consider how you're going to deal with those differences when raising a child. It's not impossible, but it's a headache that's probably best avoided. But what does our audience think? Have you ever been able to make it work despite you and your partner not sharing the same beliefs? How did you overcome that? We'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. Please leave your stories in the comments. I'd love to make a video of them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.